tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, like I said, we just came through looking at the 10 fetters, essentially an expanded list of hindrances that that are, or a set of insights, really hindrances that become insights as we see through them, that classically are thought of as the things that fall away as we deepen in wisdom, deepen toward freedom. And the last few include these deep deep layers of the self in the form of conceit, mana, and restlessness, and finally primal ignorance. Really just this way that we don't understand our life, what we're doing here, what's going on, what it is to be a being embedded in conditions, embedded in the coming and going of birth and death. So we've really come through this whole series of propositions for how we might understand, our self and our existence, the situation of being that we find ourselves in, and how seeing through those one at a time or in groupings, coming toward just deeper and deeper letting go of the unconscious, mostly unconscious patterns that guide our stories and our sense of ourself, that there's a beautiful freedom on the other side of that. So let's just start off with, if there's any questions or themes that you want to bring forward from those weeks, folks who were there, anything you'd like to further pull out about those. Let's see if there's anything there, and then we'll open toward broader practice questions. This is a great question. So are there any of the fetters that before they become fetters to let go of are actually supportive qualities in practice? I'm tempted to say in a certain way all of them, but in different ways. So like, the very first one, Sakkaya Ditthi, the belief that there's, or the felt sense really, not so much belief, like it's obvious you have a self. So the felt sense that you have this distinct individual self that has volitions, that has a story, that is a kind of I, me, that could own things, mine, right? The felt sense of I, me, mine. It's commonly, and maybe a little bit tritely said that, like you have to have a self before you can let go of one. This is one of the ways, that's an oversimplification of some of the ways that we might think of there being a harmonious weave between types of therapeutic work, like attachment work or developmental work, that are really strengthening the sense of having a coherent self, being a coherent self in the world, strengthening our sense of ourself in relationships. All of this needs to happen to be healthy psychologically and in relationship. And so as part of that practice, you want to have a sense of your own story as being coherent, as being clear to you. You understand the themes of your own life. You understand your patterns, like your attachment style, and then your patterns in relating to others, through that style. In all of those kinds of healing work, having a clear sense of yourself is helpful. And even in Dharma work, you like a clear sense of the boundaries between yourself and others is the basis of the precepts. So in order to keep your ethical commitments, you don't let go of your sense of being an individual. In this conversation I had today, we were talking a bit about misconduct by teachers, because there was one that had recently come up, and that this person had asked me about, and we got on to talking about, um, you know, the kind of spiritual bypass where someone misinterprets the non-dual teachings on like emptiness to suggest that because persons are empty or there's no self, that somehow that washes away the responsibility for, ethical care for each other, which is ridiculous, right? So you have to have a strong sense of self, a strong sense of individuals being real to be able to um, keep your precepts in a clear, and unambiguous way. So I think that's true actually throughout the whole series. Um, Maybe with a couple exceptions, but let me think through a couple of them, right? If the second one is doubt, doubt in the path, um, you certainly at the beginning, you want to really check out a spiritual path before you commit to it. You want to really check out a teacher. And so you want to have a kind of healthy discernment. And some of that might well be like, why should I believe this teaching that this charismatic person is bringing forward until I really check it out for myself? So there's a kind of healthy doubt. Rites and rituals do not themselves liberate, that's true, but they can also be tremendously helpful in healing, in the discipline of practice, in developing faith and devotion. Um, you know, the the fetters that are also hindrances of, sensual desire and ill will. There's this way that maybe differently from some of the others, uh, but they do have their like positive aspects or qualities, you know, um, that like like to have the sensual desire to hear the Dhamma or to be around good friends in the Dhamma. Those are sensual desires, right? You want certain sensory experiences. Um, you know, so uh, like yeah, be drawn to the experiences of the senses that that deepen your path, including being drawn to experiences that we would call like infused with eros, um, if that's the right energy that you need to bring in or to heal at this moment, if it's appropriate for your station in life, like you're a lay person, you're not committed to celibacy, you know like brightening the somatic energies of Eros is appropriate for lay people, and can be healthy in all sorts of ways. You know, Ill will, almost never useful, but hatred and ill will is a particularly unuseful form of some qualities that can be helpful, like sharp discernment, in the way that aversive types can be clear and understand what's wrong with a situation, so that can have a kind of clear seeing in it. Ill will is maybe the only one that I almost have a categorical no to. But lots of y'all are activists, and you might have a relationship with a kind of righteous rage, a sort of love infused anger on behalf of justice. Footnote, I don't think that's actually ill will. Like, I think righteous rage is not the same as hatred and ill will, so I'm standing firm on those being hindrances. But, uh, yeah, so that one. The rest, like, Fetters 6 and 7, desire for like grasping at subtle meditative states, the jhanas and then the immaterial jhanas, absolutely helpful on the path. You should totally grasp at those until you've mastered them and gotten to, the stage of being a non-returner. And only then do you let go of them. Those are absolutely clear that those are positive qualities on the path, and the Buddha teaches them all the time. The last three are deep. So a little bit like you're looping back to Sakaya Ditti, where, you know, the like the conceit of self, manas, it's it's not just like better than, worse than, same as, the sort of those kind of conceits. But it's also just, you know, it's again a variation of the sense of self, self as distinct from other. And so this fundamental layer of self and other is absolutely, it's the water we swim in, but it's the water or the relational field in which we cultivate the path. So, you know, that that advice of the Buddha's to hang out with wise people and not fools, his word, not mine, bala, means both child and fool. Sorry, kids. Um, but uh, you know, how do you know that someone's wise? When the Buddha says, find the people that are wiser than you and hang out with them, you have to assess them. You have to feel self-other in relation to them, to have teachers, to have hierarchy at all, to have good friends. So, conceit in this way is like, it's the basic operating system of having a self and being in a relationship, and so it's there with us till the very end. So, use it for good. Likewise, restlessness, like, yeah, at the very end, it's a fetter because you have to be able to set everything down. But until that point, it's the motor of action. It is action itself. It is volition, really, in a very deep way, this impulse toward movement. And so, um, you know, at this level of the operating system, things are in a certain way neither good nor bad. They're actually just, that's like saying, is electricity a good thing? It's like a natural force. Restlessness or movement or impulse is is this natural force within life to move, to attain, to uh, be purposeful. So, you know, in a way, it's just an energy. It's neither good nor bad. At the very, very, very end of the path, it's one of the last things you set down before cessation, before, full unbinding. But until then, it's the motor that makes everything happen. Um, the last one, ignorance, maybe along with ill will. This is one where I'm like, you know, what's the useful aspect of this before final unbinding? And it's almost like it's not really a quality that's either useful or non-useful. It's um, like maybe in a very, all right. So we have to go Zen with this one and say that it's the fetter aspect of the quality of not knowing, something like that, which is what it literally translates to, vidya, um, lack of knowledge, not seeing clearly. Um, the positive side of that quality is a kind of openness to not believing immediately or hewing to our narrative of how things are. So if you have an attitude of not knowing, maybe this is weaponizing ignorance for the good, something like that. Um, that's a phrase. I don't know about that phrase, but something like that. So basically, yes, is the answer to your question. I think that for sure we can understand all of the qualities of the path. You can understand, everything you cultivate in the path as um, tactical, contingent, right? Concentration is great until you no longer need it, and then you set it down. The path itself is great until it, like the raft, gets you across the river, and then you don't keep carrying it with you. You don't carry anything with you to the other side, whatever that other side means. And so um, everything on the path then has to be let go of. And uh, so, yeah, that's my spin on the positive side of those 10. It's a super nice question. Eva dropped a reflection in the chat back to Sakaya Ditti, but it pings these last few also. The capacity to identify with our own experience and to connect deeply with ourselves ultimately allows for loosening of identification without spiritual bypassing. Absolutely, right? So better said than I said it, that piece about the strengthening of the self as necessary to be able to do the healing that then later unbinds the self. It's way too easy to talk in a trite way about not self or selflessness or about these kind of deep unbindings. Um, you know, uh, it's wild, strange work actually to orient ourselves toward uprooting qualities that have been the bedrock of our sense of who we are for our entire life. Deconstructive paths, really all spiritual paths, if you take them seriously and fully, are strange, fierce medicines in the world to really ask, who am I and what does this mean? Um, that means inviting the potential that it all falls apart around us. Um, and those of us that teach these paths, I think we kind of just keep promising like it's going to be okay. It falls apart in a good way. But it's important that it it's important that we do what we can so that it does fall apart in a good way. That's why the monastics don't just disappear into the woods and never come back. They stay in community. They stay connected. You know, that's why, there's not just the refuge of the Dhamma, like here, take these teachings and go deconstruct yourself until there's nothing left. There's the Sangha and there's the teachers and your peers and, um, you know, so, all right. Yeah. Pausing there. Um, Further reflections and questions. Um, Great. A review of stream entry. What are some signposts or flags? How do you know? Um, so in the list, there's a bunch of different ways that the Buddha talks about stream entry. Only one of them is this fetters list, where the three fetters that fall away with stream entry are personality view, um, doubt, which is really doubt in the path in this list, and belief in the liberatory potential of rituals and rites and rituals. They're traditionally called, translated, magic. Um, so, but there are other lists, and there are lists that include like knowing that your faith in the triple gem is strong. So really having a clear heart connection to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and particularly that, you know, uh, it uses the stock phrases for Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the definitions for the triple gem, you know, that we recite when we're doing like the morning puja. So when we chant Iti Piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijja Charana Sampano, um, perfected in knowledge and conduct, teacher of gods and humans, this whole list of the qualities of the Buddha. Um, if you hear that list or you recite that list and your heart goes, yep, that's right, that's how it is. I'm with that guy. You know, if you have a clear felt sense of the rightness of the Buddha as an awakened being, the truth of that being's awakening, um, then like great, set. That's a quality to have in the heart. Likewise, the qualities of the Dhamma, the Dhamma is apparent here and now, timeless, to be understood experientially, for yourself by the wise. Um, when you think of the Dhamma, that's your felt sense. Like, yes, the Dhamma is like that. The teachings are like that. I'm with that. I go with that. And the Sangha, that is practiced well in all these ways, a field of merit for the world. You think of the Sangha and you're like, yes, I'm, I'm solidly in my refuge with all these things, you know, and, um, and there's these ways where like, oh, if all of those things are solid, and um, and your heart has this kind of like rootedness, this solid rootedness, That's a kind of stream entry, and the Buddha uses that also. There's a couple other sort of qualities in that version of the list. But it's not, like it's a totally different list. So that's interesting, right? I think what we can see, um, and then I've talked about it in a couple of other places, different traditions just hold this differently anyway. It's described completely differently in Burma than in Thailand, for instance, our two kind of root traditions here. In the Burmese system, it's like you've recalled experiencing a moment of cessation, nirodha, following the systematic attainment of the 16 systematic, insights, beginning with namarupa and the characteristics and kama and arising and passing and dissolving, et cetera, et cetera. And so all these different explanations of what it is, if you kind of swirl them all together, one of the felt senses you can get from them, or the felt sense that I get from them, is almost like I take the word, like the name stream entry literally. That there's a stream of the Dhamma. There's a kind of that these teachings and the tradition and the community all together create a kind of momentum in the world that's it's a kind of energy. There's a kind of like you can get swept up into it. And in a way, it feels like that the refuge that you've taken or have gone for is solid. The sense you get from all the different descriptions of stream entry is that there's something that that it's a little bit like the Christian descriptions of born again, like something has happened to you that you can feel is real and is irrevocable in a certain way, like it will never unhappen. And stream entry comes with the guarantee of full liberation in 7 lifetimes or less, whatever that means, metaphorical, literal, who knows. But it's the promise of that when it says like, oh, you'll never again be reborn in one of the unfortunate births, like the ghost realm, the hell realms, the animal realms. Part of what that means is you'll never completely forget that you've had this understanding, right? Because to be reborn in those realms, it's not just that they're physically painful or whatever, it's that there's not mindfulness and consciousness of the path. So you never completely forget that you're on the path. You could become a stream enterer and like super backslide and like get lost in some difficult human realm for a while. But, um, you know, 7 lifetimes, which is not very long in the scheme of things, you will remember and you'll go further. So I think if we think about the Dhamma as a kind of stream in the world, there's this way that you've gotten yourself to it, and you've gotten yourself somehow into it enough that the current has begun to take you, and that you can, you're not entirely on your own effort anymore. You're in a stream of something larger than yourself. That's how it feels to me. So, but to go back to the fetters then, the first three, the definition for stream entry in this model is you've seen through Sakkaya Ditthi. You no longer have doubt about the path, and you know clearly what rites and rituals are good for and what they're not. So like I said when we started this series, I think really the core insight here is Sakkaya Ditthi. It's the first one. It's really the hinge. And so, what is it about seeing through the assumed individual self that we've always, carried around habitually? What is it about seeing through that constitutes this like irrevocable, entry into the momentum of the path? And I think it's really that this is one of those insights I think all of the characteristics really are like this, but this is one particularly, it hits very close to home when we have it. And it's one of those insights that when you see it or feel it, um, you can never unsee it or unfeel it. You know, once you once you get a visceral felt sense, and it comes in a lot of ways, you know, sometimes it comes in that flash of like, oh, I am nature and I'm intimately connected with all of nature, and there's no real boundary to my physical or emotional or psychic being. You know, I'm embedded in the natural world. That's an anatta insight. Folks who have that strongly, their life changes forever. You know, that's once you have that, you don't ever really forget it. And so in the Dhamma language, you know, once you see through the kind of illusory separate self, that changes you going forward, right? Everything you do, all of your relational interactions, they can still be muddled up with hindrances, right? There's 9 more fetters to go, but um, but you see through that, and um, and you're changed forever in the sense that you won't ever unsee it. And so, you know, that's stream entry. Uh, in whatever of the lists you're looking at, there's a kind of uh, you know, irrevocableness or can't go backwardsness to it. Uh, and so, you know, we might feel into this together. You might feel in your own practice. Um, you know, I think a lot of us might still have, you know, moments of doubt about the path, um, or you know, I think it's certainly possible to not have the felt sense of the emptiness of the self, you know, front and center all the time. Mostly you don't. Mostly we go through our relationships as if we are real and others are real, and that's appropriate. Um, but uh, but I think a lot of folks who've been around the Dhamma for a while, as many of us in this room have, um, if you take one of those descriptions of stream entry that's like, are you really solid in your refuges? Like Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, when we talk about those, there's not doubt in your heart. You know this is a good path and that it leads somewhere. And somehow in your heart you know that. Um, and you trust the path, you know, even if there are, you know, there are unskillful teachers, there's unskillful teachings, there's all sorts of ways that the Dhamma itself is impermanent, is dukkha, you know, is itself selfless. Um, but still, your heart knows that there's something right here, right and good and real and trustworthy. If you know that, uh, there's absolutely parts of this tradition that will say that's stream entry. That's what stream entry feels like. You know, is that kind of knowing. You know, um, and so, you know, if I say that and you're like, yeah, I feel like that about the Dhamma, but I don't feel like I'm ready to claim stream entry. It's like, yeah, you know, don't worry about it. You don't have to claim anything. Definitely don't put it on your Instagram profile, you know, like, or whatever. Um, uh, there are controversial teachers who have done this, of course. Um, uh, yeah, we should have a little LinkedIn button, you know, stream once returner, you know. Um, Uh, yeah, no. But you know, there is a small tradition of like Gonzo insight teachers, most infamously somebody who put out a book, um, uh, and as for in the author field wrote, you know, the Arahant and then his name, um, and you know, so really that's guts to go out and be like, yeah, you know, I'm there. Um, Traditionally, monastics don't, you know, announce their um, level. Uh, Even thinking of them as levels, I think is, you know, it's almost like too consumeristic, right? Um, and of course the hidden um, the hidden grammatical but also view sort of trap, of course, is to even be the like, I am the self who is a stream enterer. Like, yeah, I saw through myself, therefore I am a, like the whole thing crumbles quickly, right? Um, and but there's a way that if you don't get caught in any of the like language traps or the weird sort of paradoxes in it, I think what you can do is, you know, in just in the field of your own heart, you can ask yourself or you can feel for yourself like, am I am I still, in a way, lost in the world, in my sense of who I am and what's going on? Am I really fundamentally not on the path? Or am I actually really on a path that I trust? And sometimes I think that we're so used to being doubtful and not good at admitting our own goodness that it can be hard to do this. But you might actually feel, and and it's great to do this and not say it to anybody because as soon as it gets relational, it gets weird. But just for yourself to say, am I in the stream? And and it's almost like, I hope you are, I hope we all each are in this. The whole point of gathering in Sangha over and over and over is to enter the stream together, you know, is to be in the stream of goodness. And so, you know, like we want this to work. We're trying to actually strengthen the triple gem of, adoring the tradition of the Buddha and studying the Dhamma deeply and gathering in Sangha. It's not an empty thing that we're doing, you know. And so, like, I want it to work. So that's how I think about stream entry. Is Yeah, I actually really think that what we're doing can result in that experience internally for us. Um, so, right. Again, technically in the list, stream entry is attained with the release of just the first three. So Sakkaya Ditthi, skeptical doubt, and belief in rites and rituals. Um, the next two, sensual desire and ill will, are weakened with the second path, which is once return, one more human birth, and then arhatship. This uh, these next two, fetters 4 and 5, are fully unbound with the attainment of non-returner, and then the last five, attachment to subtle meditative states, and then the big last three, are all unbound together with the attainment of arahantship. So the first three go with stream entry, and the rest are weakened and then go later. So then the core of stream entry in this list of fetters is just personality view, doubt, and rites and rituals. Yes. Yeah, that latter one first. It's not a universal definition of stream entry. That is the definition that's based on the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, so the big commentary from Acharya Buddhaghosa in the 5th century. And that system is used um, in many different traditions, but very centrally in several of the Burmese traditions, but differently. Like, that's the definition of stream entry for Mahasi as well, the Mahasi Upandita kind of system. Um, but uh, but it's interpreted very differently in the PAOK system, because it's based on extremely deep jhana. You're actually doing all of this immersion work first, and then doing very specific exercises or contemplations to work through these kind of vipassana steps. Um, Mahasi's big modernist uh, intervention was to say that with um, uh, some concentration and very persistent noting, you could go through the Vipassana steps without jhana. That was his big claim. All sorts of people didn't like that. Some people really did. So those are two different branches, but they both use the same idea, which is that there's this that once you're ready for Vipassana, whether you've done deep jhana first or you're kind of going straight in, the so-called dry insight method, that's the Mahasi thing, that when you do get to Vipassana, you're setting up the conditions for the mind, the citta, to experience this specific set of insights, usually in the same order. And they're called insights, but they're not really mental. They're more like states. Some of them are more like flashes of understanding, like the first one, Namarupa, having a visceral sense that the observer and the object observed are two different things. And so that can be both an understanding, but it can have a very particular somatic sensation of seeing that those things are separate. And then there's ones that are really emotional, like fear, disgust, and misery, which are, insights 6, 7, and 8 in the sequence. It goes all the way through this kind of purification process through equanimity into a moment of cessation. That's the moment of nibbana that you're talking about, or nirodha. So that's the commentarial understanding of stream entry. That is different from what the Buddha either gives here in the list of the 10 fetters or in those other discourses in the Pali Canon that are more like, once your refuge is really strong, you could call that stream entry, that kind of thing. So yes, there's lots of different definitions of stream entry. This hinges on the term putujana, which is like worldly folks, and the term Arya, or noble folks. And in the morning puja, there's this line, the four pairs, the 8 kinds of noble beings. These are the Blessed One's disciples. And so this is a definition of the Sangha. And the 4 pairs are the people who have either attained or are working toward each of these 4 levels of awakening. So everybody who has attained stream entry or is working towards stream entry. And so this is, of course, a subset of people in general. So there's all sorts of worldly people, most of whom are not on the path. So that's just worldly folks. But then of those folks, some, small subset begin practicing towards stream entry. The thing I love about this, the 4 pairs, the 8 kinds of noble beings, this is the Blessed One's Sangha, is that, it scoops in everyone who is sincerely practicing. So, maybe the vast majority of the Sangha is people practicing towards stream entry. And then there's, the people who have attained stream entry, then the people who are between stream entry and once return, they're practicing for the attainment of once return, etc., for each of the 4 stages all the way through, to the fully liberated. But yeah, that's one of the formal definitions of the Sangha. The other famous one being, lay folks across the gender spectrum and monastic folks across the gender spectrum. So traditionally called the fourfold Sangha, which you can broaden to the manyfold Sangha. A comment in the chat, it's interesting to me that some of the definitions of stream entry allow for the possibility of people who have never heard of Buddhism becoming stream entrants, the 3 fetters definition, and others seem to require knowledge of the Dhamma. There's this beautiful passage where Mahapajapati, the Buddha's aunt or stepmother, both, and the first nun, is asking him about what makes a certain teaching the Dhamma or not. And the Buddha essentially says, it doesn't have to use the same words as the Dhamma, but it has to contain the core qualities, which are the Eightfold Path. And so um, I think that, there are some ways that, yeah, you could see through the self in a lot of different contemplative traditions. I think a lot of traditions do contain, that wisdom. Um, the second fetter of doubt, if we take it, literally to mean doubt about the path, I think that implies the Dhamma. Um, it would be curious to, we could to like dig into the commentaries and see like what if folks, what did the monastics, really think about this? But it is clear that it's possible to become fully enlightened, fully liberated, without learning the Dhamma. But you have to kind of come upon it yourself. So there's this category of Buddhas called Pacceka Buddhas, or Pratyeka Buddha in Sanskrit, which is called a private Buddha. And it means you found your way to full liberation during a time when there was no Buddha, or there was no Dhamma to study, but you found full liberation anyway. But then you didn't start a tradition. You didn't become a fully liberated Buddha and start to teach. So you're just as free, but you don't have the karma of teaching, and kind of starting the wheel turning that Buddhas do. So it's clearly possible to become deeply liberated in traditions other than the Dharma. And I think basically you're right here that most of these fetters, they don't require the full scaffolding of the Dhamma to be attainable. Like you could see through, you could see through your limited self, like through deep connection with nature, right? You could have a more of like an indigeneity sort of insight that um, that's liberating in many of the same ways, without being in the Dhamma context. As you go further into the list, they become a little more specific to right view, really, like really unbinding conceit and restlessness and ignorance. I suspect, the tradition will argue that these really can only be done within the context of the Buddha's Dhamma itself, because the core of right view, the core of cessation really has to be seeing the Noble Truths. But what the Buddha said to Mahapajapati was, if the Noble Truths are there, then it's good Dhamma, even if it's from outside our lineage specifically. So as long as the Noble Truths are there, it's the Dhamma, and, by any other words name. It's a path of, it's a gradual path, and you know, essentially what you're saying is like, I love the path, but I still have hindrances, you know, and then I could be like, yeah, me too, you know, I love this path. I think it's brilliant. I totally like when I really connect with it in my heart, I just know its goodness. Um, uh, but every day through the course of my day, am I, like, do I have sustained connection to its goodness that translates into my disciplined action in every, like, no, I have hindrances, I'm somewhere on that path toward, you know, stream entry or wherever I'm at. I'm in one of those zones. And even in this list of fetters, right? Notice that sensual desire and ill will come get uprooted later. So you can totally be a stream enterer and still have sensual desire. Technically according to the list, it's right there. So you can tell yourself, oh look, you know, not you could just be like, not yet a once returner. And like, bully for you. Like that's awesome. Uh, the I think when, watch out all of us for any way that Mara, that the heart of doubt tries to turn our felt sense of our own goodness against us, in this way. Um, the the only thing you really need, I think, is you know, is to love the path, to love your engagement with it. Everything else, it comes and goes. We work on ourselves. You know, it's it's a path for a reason. It has distance. You know, so don't be hard on yourself. In some traditions, in some Buddhist traditions, there's this feeling like the only thing you need to attain is stream entry. Everything after that, like you can kind of relax, like you're downhill. It's a luge from there. Um, but um, uh, and all stream entry really is that is the knowing in your own heart that you love the path, like in a very plain, simple way. You know, you could be like, um, I'm not even in the stream. I'm still scared of water, but but I know the river is that way, and and I'm just like flopping around, flopping my way toward it. But I can feel as I flop around that I love it, and I know where I'm going, even if like right now I'm watching, I'm right now I'm just binging on Mamdani videos and I want what I want and I'm full of sensual desire and ill will and all the things. Um, and then, I close the machines and I walk outside under the stars and the frogs are singing and something in me goes, "Oh, I feel better now than I did an hour ago because we've been together in the Dhamma." And, just take a moment and delight in that. Um, you know, and and the stream is there. Maybe we don't even think I'm in the stream. It's more like, can you feel the stream? Feel the presence of the stream all around, the stream of Dhamma moving through the world. If you can feel it, you can get in it. So may our practice bring us to the stream, into the stream, downstream. May all the streams be undammed. May the salmon enjoy the stream. May the streams of goodness flow through the world, all the way to the ocean of freedom that is the truth, always present all around us. May we be safe and protected, free, joyful, together. And may our practice be for the benefit of all. Thank you so much. Big love. Cheers to the forces of goodness tonight. And it's lovely to see you.